Hello everyone, and welcome to the 30th explainer video in the series of research methodology, titled Cross-Sectional and Longitudinal Research Design. I am so incredibly excited to be with you all today for this one. You know, I always like to think of a researcher as a detective. Our main job is to capture reality, right? We're trying to figure out exactly what is happening, why it's happening, and how things actually change over the course of time. But how do we even set up that investigation in the first place? Well, you can't just walk into a crime scene without a strategy. That is exactly where research design comes in. It's your master plan. It dictates literally every single move you make in your study. And today, we are going to look at two of the absolute most critical designs used everywhere, from the social sciences to education, health, and way beyond. So let's dive right into this. Okay, here is a quick roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start off by looking at the roll of time, and then we'll unpack the cross-sectional snapshot, followed by the longitudinal moving picture. After that, we'll bring them head-to-head in a showdown comparison, explore their real-world applications and ethics, and finally wrap up by helping you choose the right design for your own work.
All right, part one, the roll of time, capturing reality. Let's get started. When you sit down to design a study, you are immediately faced with a fundamental, totally unavoidable choice about time. Basically, are you going to freeze a single moment, or are you going to press record and watch things play out? Think of the cross-sectional snapshot like that detective arriving at a crime scene and taking a highly detailed photograph of exactly how things look today. The data is collected at one single point in time. It captures the immediate state of affairs, frozen. But on the flip side, we have the longitudinal moving picture, and this is an entirely different beast. This is the detective tailing a subject for months, or maybe even years, collecting data repeatedly over an extended period to see exactly how they change, how they develop, or even how they stay the same. You aren't just looking at the aftermath anymore, you are literally watching the entire story unfold.
Now, as a researcher, this next point is essentially your golden rule. Way too often, people pick a method just because it's easy, or maybe it's just what they're familiar with. But as the renowned methodologists Cresswell and Cresswell tell us, research design should be selected according to the purpose of the study, the research questions, and the type of evidence needed. Honestly, there is no universally perfect design out there. There's only the right tool for the specific evidence you need to gather. If you want to describe a present condition or figure out what is happening right this second, you grab your camera for a snapshot. But if you want to examine change, growth, or decline over a span of time, you have to grab your video camera. It's that simple. So, Section 2, the cross-sectional snapshot, examining the present. Let's take a closer look at that camera. Okay, so in a cross-sectional research design, data are collected from a sample or a population at a single point in time. Your main goal here is to describe characteristics, compare groups, or just assess the current status of something without worrying about the past or the future. For example, imagine you want to measure academic stress among college students. In a cross-sectional study, you'd send out a survey during one specific week of the academic session, maybe right before midterms when everyone is feeling the pressure. You collect all those responses, and boom, you have a perfect high-resolution snapshot of student stress levels right then and there. It is an incredible baseline. You can compare freshmen to seniors, you can compare science majors to art majors. But you have to remember the absolute limitation here. You are only capturing these students in that one isolated moment in time. You literally have no idea if they were incredibly stressed out yesterday or if they'll be completely relaxed by tomorrow.
Now, within this snapshot approach, we generally see two distinct flavors, descriptive and analytical. Descriptive studies do exactly what they sound like. They describe what exists right now. So, what percentage of students use digital learning platforms today? Or, what is the current level of job satisfaction among high school teachers? It's phenomenal for doing a rapid needs assessment. But then we have analytical cross-sectional studies. These take it a step further and look at the relationships among variables at that one point in time. For instance, is there a relationship between the amount of screen time and sleep quality? But here's a massive warning for you, coming directly from the statistician Andy Field. Just because you find an association in a cross-sectional study, you absolutely cannot prove causation. It is the ultimate chicken or egg dilemma. Think about it. If high screen time and poor sleep are linked, this snapshot cannot tell you if the screen time ruined the sleep or if the poor sleep just caused the person to stay awake scrolling on their phone. You simply don't know the sequence of events.
So the crucial takeaway here is really understanding the trade-offs of this approach. The advantages are undeniably huge. It is incredibly time efficient, it's highly economical, and it's absolutely brilliant for studying massive populations quickly through widespread surveys. It's a fantastic, super practical starting point if you're a researcher on a strict budget or a tight schedule. But the limitations are equally significant. You absolutely cannot study change over time, period.
As we just discussed with the sleep example, establishing causality is incredibly difficult because you don't know the temporal order. You just don't know which variable came first. And finally, you can easily be tricked by what we call cohort differences. Say you compare older teachers to younger teachers regarding technology use. The difference you find might not be due to biological age at all. It might just be the historical era they were raised in, the massive difference between a digital native who grew up with smartphones and someone who adopted that tech much later in life. Which brings us perfectly to our next section. Section 3, the longitudinal moving picture, tracking change.
Let's look at what this means in practice. A longitudinal research design collects data from the same individuals, groups, or units repeatedly over a period of time. Like we said earlier, we are no longer taking photographs, we are shooting a documentary. The researcher Scott Menard points out that this method is distinguished by repeated observations, which is what actually allows us to study patterns of change and temporal relationships. We aren't just guessing how people develop based on comparing different age groups at one point in time, we are actually watching the development happen in real time.
And there are basically 3 distinct ways to press record on that documentary. First up, we have trend studies. This tracks changes in a general population over time, but, and this is key, you don't need the exact same individuals. Think of a yearly poll on public opinion regarding the economy. You ask completely different people each year, but you're tracking the overall societal trend. Second, we have cohort studies. Here, you follow a specific group that shares a common experience. Maybe you study the graduating college class of 2025, and you check in on that class every 5 years. It's the same defined group, but again, not always the exact same individuals responding to your survey each time. Finally, we reach the absolute gold standard, panel studies. This is where you track the exact same individuals time and time again. Panel studies are highly prized in research because they entirely eliminate the guesswork of comparing different people. You are watching the exact same individual evolve over time.
Let's make that more concrete. Imagine mapping out a timeline to track the academic progress of a specific student group using a panel study. You measure their math and reading skills in year 1 when they are just in grade 6. Then, you intentionally wait. You come back to the exact same students in year 3 when they hit grade 8. And then you measure them one more time in year 5 when they are in grade 10. You aren't comparing a random group of 6th graders to a completely different group of 10th graders. You are watching the genuine individual academic development of Mary, John, and Sarah over a span of 5 full years. It is incredibly powerful for seeing exactly how interventions or natural growth affect the very same people.
The advantages of this approach are just massive. You actually get to study development firsthand. More importantly, as researchers Shadish, Cook, and Campbell tell us, you can establish temporal order. Because you are actually tracking over time, you can see if, say, a drop in self-esteem actually preceded an academic decline, which brings you so much closer to understanding genuine causality. But there is a massive catch. The disadvantages are severe. It is incredibly time-consuming, sometimes taking years or even decades of your career. It is wildly expensive to keep a study running for that long. And the single biggest threat of all is participant attrition. Life happens, right? People move away, they change their email addresses, they get too busy, or they honestly just get tired of answering your surveys. If half your panel disappears by year 5, all that expensive data you collected completely loses its validity.
All right, Section 4, comparing the 2 designs, the showdown. Let's put them head to head.
Think of this comparison as your ultimate research cheat sheet. When we look at costs and time required, cross-sectional is low and quick. You can literally get it done in a matter of weeks. Longitudinal, however, is high cost and can take months or years. But look at what that massive investment buys you. For causal interpretation, cross-sectional is very weak because everything is just measured all at once. Longitudinal provides much stronger evidence because you can actually see what happens first and what follows. And finally, look at the risk of attrition. In a snapshot, it's virtually non-existent. You measure once, you collect your data, and you're done. But in a longitudinal study, attrition is a high, constant, agonizing risk that you have to manage every single day. You are always trading speed and convenience for temporal depth and causal clarity. There is simply no free lunch in research methodology.
Moving on to Section 5, Applications, Validity, and Ethics Theory in Practice. Let's see this in the real world. These designs are the absolute backbone of modern research across so many disciplines. Let's look at education. A policymaker might use a cross-sectional study today to figure out the current digital literacy of students to see if they need to immediately buy more laptops for a school district.
But they would rely on a longitudinal study to track long-term learning growth to see if those laptops actually helped improve test scores over a 5-year period. In health, cross-sectional data tells us the current prevalence of a disease in a city, right now, which is great for immediate triage and resource allocation. But longitudinal data tracks those patients to see the progression of that disease over a lifetime, informing long-term care strategies. And in the social sciences, you use snapshots for today's public opinion polls right before an election, but you use moving pictures to track generational social mobility across entire decades. But we have to remember that neither design is perfect. Internal validity is a serious challenge for both of them. Cross-sectional studies struggle heavily with time order and confounding variables, those hidden, sneaky factors you didn't even account for. Now, longitudinal studies might solve that time order problem, but they face their own nightmares. For instance, what if a massive policy change or, a global pandemic happens right in the middle of your 10-year study? Suddenly, your data is completely skewed by a massive outside historical force that you couldn't possibly predict. Shadish, Cook, and Campbell remind us that a study's validity completely depends on addressing these rival explanations, no matter which design you end up choosing.
And look, we absolutely cannot talk about doing human research without talking about ethics. It's totally foundational. The Belmont Report lays out the core principles perfectly: respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. You need informed consent and voluntary participation. A longitudinal study is honestly almost like a marriage between the researcher and the participant. Your ethical responsibility doesn't just end after year 1 when they sign a consent form. You have an ongoing, active duty to protect their data year after year as circumstances inevitably change. You must ensure they know they can voluntarily withdraw at literally any time without penalty. It's exactly this kind of conversational, transparent planning and profound respect that builds the participant trust you desperately need to keep them engaged for the long haul.
And finally, Section 6, choosing your research design, the final verdict. We have covered a vast amount of ground today, all the way from the immediate crime scene snapshots to those decade-long moving pictures. Ultimately, the choice rests entirely on your shoulders and the specific question you are trying to answer. If your goal is to understand the present, to estimate prevalence, or to compare groups right now with limited time and a tight budget, the cross-sectional snapshot is going to be your best friend. But if your mission is to uncover how things genuinely develop, to track growth, continuity, or long-term impact, and you actually have the resources to sustain it, you absolutely must use the longitudinal moving picture. So, before you start your next project, ask yourself a simple but profound question. Are you trying to capture the world exactly as it is today, or are you brave enough to track where it's going tomorrow? Choose the tool that fits the exact evidence you need to uncover. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope this explainer has empowered you to make the right methodological choice for your own incredible work. If you found this breakdown helpful, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel so you never miss out on our deep dives into research methodology. Keep asking great questions, and I'll see you in the next one.